Today on Locked On Red Wings, Detroit is blanked by Toronto in the Red Wings dress rehearsal game.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News, while I am a color commentator for Oakland University Hockey. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Scotty, hi, by the way. How's it going, man? It's been
Hey, man. Good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks. I mean,
sure
I'm here to...
thousands of people out there that are very glad that you're back too, and it's not just me rambling for 30 minutes.
No, man, I was reading those comments while I was. I mean, I totally wasn't on my phone on my little mini vacation.
What are you talking about, dude?
But you were getting pretty rave reviews. I'm starting to wonder if me coming back is going to hurt the ratings rather than help the ratings, man.
I assure you that is not true. We're happy to have you back, buddy. Was it good? Good time?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we, honest to God, dude, did not do like anything.
Yeah,
like,
that's awesome. That sounds fantastic.
We went to Saugatuck, and then like on the last day we checked out Holland because it's like 15 minutes up the road. Beautiful. It's beautiful out there. But we like felt obligated, and no one wants to hear me talk about my life. We'll move on very quickly here, I promise. But like we felt obligated like the first day to like do things because like you're on vacation, you should do things when you're in a new city. And then like we were looking at each other and we're like, it's our mini honeymoon because I didn't have enough PTO for a full one. And I was like, what should we do? Like, what do we actually want to do? And she
Nothing.
And I said the same thing, and it was watch the Tigers. And so, the Tigers' first playoff game in a decade.
It was funny because at your wedding, I walked up to her and I gave her a hug, and I was like, "This is the score." I was like, "It's 5-4 in the eighth," by the way, and she was like, "Thank you."
It was like right after the Kerry Carpenter grand slam.
Right.
Yeah. So we just vegged out on the couch and we watched the Tigers. We watched Tarek Skubal dominate the Astros, and on the way home on Wednesday, we listened to the Tigers the entire ride home on 97.1. So
good for you, brother.
It was fun. We just chilled. It was we had no energy. We slept, and then we.
That sounds a lot like how I would describe the Red Wings in this hockey game, I think.
Nice transition.
Slow and low energy. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so first episode back from my wedding. Red Wings decide to just lay an absolute egg out there.
Give nothing to talk about, yeah.
We were talking about it. It's like this was their dress rehearsal game, right? Like they have everybody on the roster who's going to be playing dressed for this game, save JT Compher, who, by the way, the news on him is like just a couple maintenance days. That's what I heard. He's okay. But you get Marco Kasper in the lineup, so there's a little bit of excitement there, and we'll talk about that. But you're looking at this lineup, and you're going, okay, this should be a good game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Granted, again, preseason, so it's not like their full roster. And they go out there, and I think, honestly, Scotty, if I were to say, like, my main takeaway from this game is, like, this may have been the dress rehearsal, but they played it like you would expect an A squad to play it in the preseason, which is just go half speed, go throughout the motions, and what happened is what usually happens in those preseason games is the team with players that have more to prove is the team that ultimately won the game.
Yeah, and it's a dress rehearsal in the sense of the roster they took was, again, all but one or two, or maybe just JT Compher was the only one. So it was a dress rehearsal in that sense, but it wasn't like it's the last preseason game either, right? Like if we were starting regular season hockey in 2 days, we'd probably have a much different tone, and we'd probably come out here and be like, oh, like that, I don't know, it's pretty lethargic. Like, I'm not sure I'm really, injected with optimism going into, opening night after that performance. But like, what, they still have 2 or 3 games. Like it's like they'll take, we'll talk about it this weekend. Like they'll probably have most of their starters play one of the 2 games this weekend, and then they'll try to actually ramp up and get a little bit closer. But just like no timing in this game at all. Like that was my biggest thing. Like the passing was an atrocity, man. There was no timing. There was no feel for where everybody else was. And that, that if there is any amount of concern, and it's preseason, I'm not trying to like sound the alarms or anything, but if there is anything you want to take away from it, I think that's relatively fair, just because outside of Casper filling in for Comfer, like everybody was with the people they're going to be in the regular season with as far as lines go. We saw the shutdown line, we saw the top line, and just the passing, the timing on passing was just atrocious, man. Nobody hit anybody on the stick. It was really, really sloppy. And again, I'm not like freaking out about it. It's a mid preseason game. Like it's not even the true dress rehearsal in terms of like they start the regular season next time they dress. So like, I think they're just trying to get out of every game healthy and trying to slowly kind of ramp themselves back up to it. And we'll see, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty succinct way of putting it, is how you just did there. Like it was boring, man. I'm not going to lie to you. I was bored out of my mind watching this hockey game. And what's funny is if you look at this team, if you look at the numbers statistically speaking, the Red Wings were actually the better team in this hockey game, right? Like they outshot the Maple Leafs 30-25. They were out hit by one hit, but it was even. They won the bulk majority of the face-offs. The special teams opportunities were fairly even. But if you look at like the shot totals in the game, the Red Wings had a 57% share of the shot attempts at 5-on-5. They had a 53% share of the unblocked shot attempts at 5-on-5. They had a 59% share of the expected goals in the game. So, like, analytically, by the numbers, like, this is a game that the Red Wings, on paper and analytically, should have won the game. Everything, all the numbers were showing that they were the team that performed better. But when you actually watch it with the eye test, as you put it, they looked out of sync. They looked like they were half-assing it, which again, to a degree, is to be expected of an A-squad game. Because again, go ahead.
I don't want them to act like this is Game 7 of the Cup in the pre.
Right.
Like I don't want that. But it's definitely. There's something very much in between what they showed tonight and Game 7 of the Cup. Like you can not get shut out too. Like that, you know what I mean? There's I think there's, we could have walked away from this with a little bit more to grab at and be like, oh, like this looked good. We can take some positive takeaways from this. Like I don't even know what else. I mean, we're gonna talk Talbot. We'll talk
Edvinsson and Casper probably.
Yeah, we'll talk goalie situation just because that's a hot button issue and continues. Every preseason game we kind of have to reevaluate the ranking or the hierarchy of goalie. We'll talk Casper because that's pretty fascinating. But like, I don't even know what else to really discuss, man. Like this was this was the A team out there, the A team plus Casper. And not a whole lot went right. Like but it was a preseason game. Like I'm not like losing sleep over the fact that not a lot went right.
That's exactly it, right? Like there's nothing. I'm not worried about it.
Right.
Why would I worry over a preseason game in which the best players and the guys who were going to make the roster didn't give it their all?
Right.
Because they're trying to not go out there and get hurt in a preseason game. So like. It sucks. It was from a podcaster standpoint, from a radio host standpoint, whatever our role may be in the media, from a journalistic standpoint, this is a horrible game to cover because nothing happened. But am I worried? Absolutely not.
Right.
It just is like there's really no big takeaways.
If this copy and paste happened in a regular season game, we would go like scorched earth. It would be like, oh, this is like an unacceptable performance. This sucked. Everybody was terrible, whatever. It's preseason. It's like, okay, well, they probably weren't trying very hard. Let's just go out and get them next time.
Right. And I think the main takeaway you had a few minutes ago was honestly the biggest takeaway you could possibly have,
right?
Which is that they looked out of sync. Like the passes weren't crisp. They never really had any good. It never felt as if at least they never had any good grade A scoring opportunities because the passing seemed out of sync the entire time. They never really felt like the breakout was all that good. But like as far as the effort level goes, like obviously I want to see the team as a fan. I want to see the team like ball out. But I'm not worried about them. A team who I perceive as having had half-assed it in a preseason game where it doesn't matter. So like that stuff doesn't matter to me. I think the out of sync stuff is something that they got to work on. Special teams, power play specifically looked pretty bad. But again, it's just I'm not worried. Like if once it gets to the regular season, they're still half-assing it and the special team still looks bad, then I'll be worried. But it's just so unbothered by this performance other than the angle that I wanted something exciting to happen so we had something to talk about.
Yeah, right. You're right. I think, and again, even the timing and the passing thing I brought up wouldn't be. I would care less about that even as well if it wasn't for the fact that this was pretty much the opening night line, sans Casper for Comfort getting swapped out. So like that again, that I think is at least important to bring up. I'm not saying people should worry about it, but we can at least bring it up because these are the actual line mates that they'll play with at least the start of the regular season. So you would have liked to see a little bit more there.
Right, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what we were mentioning a moment ago, right, with the goaltending, Edvinsson playing with Seider, and Marco Kasper slotted in the 2C role in segments 2 and 3 of Locked On Red Wings, so stay tuned to that. Got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Segment 2, rather. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Trying to rush into the weekend. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, who do you want to talk about first? You want to talk Ed? You want to talk Talbot? You want to talk Casper? When we talk about, I won't even say notable performers, just like anecdotally guys we noticed.
No, let's have the Edvinsson conversation. Wasn't the best performance from him. Obviously,
certainly
a couple of penalties. They were both
cross-checking, yeah.
Yeah. The one was pretty dang egregious. The one behind the net there was pretty rough, yeah. I mean, again, not trying to overreact to anything in the preseason, but that is something that young players getting penalized, especially on the blue line, is something that a lot of people talk about as a big adjustment that has to be made, and so that's an adjustment he's going to have to make. And I think that I don't know how much we're going to put into all of the, like, he's going to be, on a pair with Jeff Petrie, who's a veteran, so he can, like, take him under his wing and whatnot. I don't know how much, everybody's going to put a different amount of weight into those kind of stories and reports and whatnot. But, yeah, man, like, they weren't good penalties. It was not a very clean game by anybody. He was kind of in the middle of that. And I didn't think he looked awful outside of those. Those are two pretty big moments in the game. And that's obviously something that when the regular season comes around, we cannot consistently have him just, like, especially on a cross check, man. Like, that's just, it's so beyond avoidable. Like, just, you know what I mean? Just, like, don't hit the numbers, baby. So, yeah, I don't know. It's something that he certainly will have to make an adjustment on.
Yeah, and so, like, there's good and bad from Edvinsson. Obviously, playing with Seider, like, that was a very big physical pair. In the defensive zone, I thought they looked good. The problem with Edvinsson, again, is just he's just really, I've noticed it the last few years, and I'm not going to overreact because, again, it's just preseason. I'm gonna try not to pull a Brian here. But he just seems to be a slow starter most years. We saw it last year in the preseason where he kind of just took, like we saw today, a couple bad penalties. Like when you're the size that you are, you don't have to resort to cross checks to be physical. Like You can just be physical. You're 6'6". You're going to be bigger than 75% of the players on the ice, if not more. And so like taking bad penalties like that resort in goals against or just power play opportunities, keeping your guys down a man and giving less opportunities for your own team to score is going to hurt your team. A couple bad pinches as well. But these are all things that, like, again, I'm just not overly concerned with because you're also looking at a guy that they were really testing in this game. Like, they were playing him with Moritz Seider, top pair minutes.
Yeah.
He got the fewest offensive zone starts out of anyone on the team besides Michael Rasmussen. Like, if you go on Natural Stat Trick and you break down the 5-on-5 zone starts, he had 1 offensive zone shift start, 4 neutral zone shift starts, 3 defensive zone shift starts, and 13 on the fly. So he was getting the Moritz Seider treatment, essentially. Like, they were testing that pair out to see how well he could handle it. And in at least this preseason game, it wasn't his best outing, but he still also, despite the fact, if you want to look at the good now, despite the fact that he was kind of maybe a little overwhelmed with the sheer amount of defensive zone starts, that was still a defensive pair that generated 62%, 60% Corsi 4 percentage and 62% Fenwick 4 percentage at 5-on-5. So despite the fact they only got 1 offensive zone shift start, many on the fly and the second most on the defensive zone, they still generated 15 shot attempts for 10 against. Now that 10 against is still, tied for highest on the team in the game at 5-on-5, but again, they're getting the most minutes. So of course that sample size is going to be bigger. For them to also then generate 15 shot attempts despite how few offensive zone shift starts they got, at least according to Natural Stat Trick, is a positive sign. So, like, while it wasn't his best outing, especially with those bad penalties he was taking, there's still upside to be had and to take note of from his and Seider's performance together in this game. And, like, it's preseason. He's still a young, raw player with an incredibly high upside. So it's just, again, unbothered for the most part.
Yeah. Correct. I'm not taking 2 periods of preseason hockey and deeming anything about his future and his ceiling. We all know what he is capable of and what he can be. It's just going to be an adjustment. I think the best point you made there was the amount of defensive zone deployments he got, just because that's going to be a situation he's going to be thrown in, man. Like, they cannot possibly throw Seider out there for literally every single one. And if he wants to earn, I know that it's like, but he might try, but
they're going to try.
Can't. So I think it'll be interesting to see if Edvinsson improves throughout the season, if his responsibility and the responsibility of the pair that he's on continues to grow. I think that'll be something we'll keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think the other guy, too, you want to know, if you want to talk about young guys, right? Marco Kasper slotting in for JT Compher's role on the second line.
He's looked so good in the preseason as a whole.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I've seen people talking about it. Obviously, with my wedding and the subsequent mini moon we went on, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for me to watch Marco Kasper, but I've heard great things. So from what it sounds like, this opportunity to center Tarasenko and Kane for a full 60-minute game is well-deserved. I thought he handled himself amicably, right? Like, I don't think he was overwhelmed at any moment. There are definitely moments, like we were talking in the first segment, where a little disjointed. But, I mean, he won over 50% of his faceoffs.
Huge. We love faceoffs here.
We love faceoffs here. In 10 minutes and 39 seconds of 5-on-5 ice time, he was out there for 11 shot attempts for, 9 against. I know relative, he was a negative in this game. So relative to his teammates, he wasn't necessarily the best player out there. But, to be thrown out there in the fray, top 6 minutes, again, in the preseason. So you got to take that as a big grain of salt. But with Kane and Tarasenko, I think he handled himself well. I think he is, and we talked so much about Danielson going into the preseason. I think Marco Kasper and Carter Mazur might be making just as big, if not bigger, cases to stick around at the big club come the end of preseason than Danielson might be right now. I mean, it shows with the fact that he's playing with the big boys still.
Yeah, that my biggest takeaway is the fact that he played in this game.
Right.
Really, more than anything else, like more than anything that he did on the ice. They could have picked anybody, right? They could have picked literally anybody to fill JT Compher's shoes there for a night, his skates there, and they picked Marco Kasper, and yeah, he's looked phenomenal. I think all preseason he's been one of the biggest highlights and one of the more talked about players on the wings so far in the preseason. And yeah, I don't think he wowed as much as maybe he has in this game, but I still think he looked really good. I think he made a couple of poor plays, like individually, but as a whole, like you can get a question wrong and still get a good grade, right? Like I think that he looked really solid. He just had a couple of hiccups, and it's also going to be a little bit more highlighted when you're playing with two veterans that have been around the block and are as good as Kane and Tarasenko are. So yeah, I thought he was solid, man. I thought he filled the role really well, and I think he continues to make a push and continues to make an argument to be on this roster.
Right. And as we head into segment 3 here, we'll talk about Cam Talbot as well as the shutdown line, just honestly being the best line in this game. And then we'll talk very briefly about the last 2 preseason games, which are going to occur on Friday and Saturday. So stay tuned for that in segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Smooth.
Did you see me do it?
I was watching you a peek behind the curtain. Before all of our recordings, I typically tell Scotty, like, hey, here's our reads. I forgot to tell Scotty what our reads were today. So going into that break, that transition, I wasn't sure if he was going to like instinctively change the window so I was the whole screen and then pull me back when you noticed we kept going to
right. I did. I got it in time. We could have not talked about it and nobody would have noticed, but I was already laughing about it. So
I wanted to give you your flowers because you did a very nice job.
I appreciate it.
Producer Scotty.
Man, moving up in the world.
Is that a promotion?
Well, you tell me. You've done it.
It's not. Anyway, Cam Talbot played in this hockey game. I thought he looked good. Obviously, I know his jockstrap ended up in the rafters on that second goal, but I mean, that was a 2-on-1. That was a tough situation to be put in. The 2-on-1 shouldn't have happened in the first place. Ben Sherratt got caught on a dangerous pinch. Jeff Petrie left back all alone on a 2-on-1. Nick Robertson, who's the hot hand right now, got the puck on the pass and beat Cam Talbot clean. The power play goal that was scored just period and a half before that. Again, not his fault. That was a breakdown defensively on the penalty kill, and we didn't even really talk about how bad the special teams was in this game. It just was not clicking at all. That was a miscommunication between Kasper and Kopp, where both players decided to follow the puck, leaving the guy who's ultimately scored that goal, who ended up scoring that goal in the end. That was, Nick Robertson for both. Nick Robertson for both, who was left all alone in the high slot when both Kasper and Kopp kind of slid over and played too aggressively between the miscommunication. That wasn't on Talbot at all. Outside of that, I mean, like, he had a .920 save percentage. He made 23 saves on 25 shots against. I thought he looked good. And I think the main takeaway from that is that the goalie competition in Detroit right now is well and alive. Like, Talbot looked good. Husso looked good in the game before that. I think Lyons looked fine. Like, hell, even Jack Campbell has shown moments. Not that I think Jack Campbell's a threat to make the NHL roster, but it's definitely a good problem to have that all 4 goalies are playing healthy, decent to good hockey for the Detroit Red Wings in the preseason.
Yeah, and I think that is if we're talking biggest positional group takeaways from really every game of the preseason, it's going to be goaltending. I think, barring a really entertaining and an eventful preseason game, I think that the goalie situation is probably going to be what's talked about the most, and I think that's rightfully so, right? Like, pretty much every game we're like, who's the 1A or who's got the net on opening night, and seems like every preseason game it's different. I think a lot of people still think it's going to be Talbot. I think that Husso had a phenomenal game while you were gone, and I think that he kind of turned some heads a little bit. And then obviously Lyon was just the trusted guy last year, and that's always an option you could go to. So I don't know, man. Like that is a good problem to have. I would much rather everyone is so good that it's a tough decision than everyone is so bad that it's a tough decision. So I will gladly take it being a tough call and us not really knowing who's going to get a majority because everyone's doing well.
Right. That's bang on, brother. You got that right on the head. The shutdown line was actually probably the best line for the Detroit Red Wings in this hockey game. That's obviously Rasmussen, Kopp, and Sherratt. At 5-on-5, they had the fewest, some of the fewest goals, expected goals against, and the most expected goals for at 0.65, 0.63, and 0.61. Now, take this to heart. At 5-on-5, they did have some of the fewest minutes, so sample size is a big factor there because I think they probably know what they have in that line, so they didn't feel like they had to play them too much. But the shutdown line was as effective as they have always were, and it generated offense for them when they were on the ice by just being good defensively. And that's a saying that they always like to hearken back to, is like good defense generates offense. As a line, they generated a Corsi for percentage of 81.82. So that's an 81% share of shot attempts for versus shot attempts against at 5-on-5. That was the best on the team. Followed up by the Marco Kasper, Patrick Kane, and Vladimir Tarasenko line.
Yeah, which is honestly, that's probably music to people's ears more so than us talking about the shutdown line here. But yeah, man, I mean, it is, like you said, I think we kind of all know what we have in that line. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in the week too, while you were gone. And yeah, I think that, like, having that conversation was very... It's just one of those things where when you rely on defense to get your productivity, if you allow goals, then you are really not valuable. Now, on the flip side, if you get shut out and no other line produces any offense, then the defense line is probably going to be the most valuable because they're the best defensively. So, yeah, like it's a good sign. We are going to need someone to deploy consistently in the defensive zone, because I have a feeling that Kane and Tarasenko line is going to pretty much be exclusively deployed in the offensive zone. So we need something to counterbalance that and counteract that. So I'm glad that they're doing well. I hope they continue to do well. It's just going to be really interesting to see if they make it throughout the entire course of the season, because just last year they didn't, right? They were together and then got broken up and then got put back together again at the end. So, yeah, good game for them, which is not something we're saying about too many people tonight. So,
yeah, and conversely, the top line was god awful in this game. Something we haven't talked about. DeBrincat had a minus 31 Corsi for percentage relative at 5-on-5, minus 31%, Scotty. That's bad. Like really, really bad. Lucas Raymond was minus 23%, and Dylan Larkin was minus 18%. Like, that is abnormally bad, especially with how many minutes that those guys play. Their line led the team at 10 minutes and 18 seconds at 5-on-5 as an entire line. Obviously, they played more individually, but change on the fly and everything, so you get a little bit separated sometimes. Yeah, they did not look good. They were probably the most disjointed looking group, and also the group that probably half-fasted the most at times.
Correct.
But again, preseason, not going to fret at all over these results. Whatever fits our narrative. So if it's a good preseason game and players look good, we're winning the Stanley Cup. If they look bad and they lose, well, it's just preseason, so who really cares? Scotty,
I totally forgot that was our joke last preseason. Preseason
brother,
only matters.
It's not a joke,
baby. It's not a
brother.
Joke.
It's not a joke.
It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle.
It truly is a lifestyle.
It's not a phase. So we got the last two preseason games heading up here this weekend. That will be today against the Ottawa Senators at LCA, and then in Toronto on Saturday at 7:00. As far as preview goes, I mean, I think you said it
we don't have
to recorded.
We don't have to we're not going to preview a preseason game, but on the broadcast, they made it sound like one of those games was going to be heavy AHL type of game, like what we saw in Buffalo earlier this week. And then the other one was going to be the actual dress rehearsal game before the regular season, full NHL roster. We'll probably have a big round of cuts here, which will, kind of help shape everything. And then we'll probably have another one after the last preseason game, the last couple. So.
Find out Austin Watson's fate. Alex Chason cut, by the way. I don't know if that
released
mentioned.
from the PTO.
Yeah. I think Lyon is supposed to get like a full game in one of these next two ones as well.
Yeah, he hasn't. I feel like he's played like comfortably the least of all the goalies. Maybe I'm imagining that though.
It says according to ESPN, he was the goalie once this preseason, and that was the second preseason game, the 2-0 win in Chicago, or at home against Chicago. After that, it was Campbell, Talbot, Husso, Talbot. So he'll play one of the next two, and I'm assuming they'll probably throw Husso in there one last time.
Yeah. They made it sound like his last game earlier this week was not his most recent game was not his last game of the preseason.
Yeah. So I'd like to see another Kosa performance, but I don't think we're going to get that because I don't think they think they're going to have to play him in the NHL. So if that makes sense, what I just said. All right. Scotty's not responding. So we're just going to wrap things up there. Scotty, any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Monday, recapping these last two preseason games as we count down to the regular season opener next Thursday. Stay tuned. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.